Hi, Dave, and I am delighted to welcome you to our Leadership or Leadership Think Tank webinar. Welcome.
Glad to be here, Debbie. Excited.
Good. So what we've got today is 39 minutes of sharing our story around our principles of leadership or leadership. And I'm going to go straight in because 39 minutes to share all of the information is a short period of time. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a welcome, and we're going to intro what the problem is and what we've diagnosed over the past 20 years of coaching and our history of 15 plus years in corporate as well. Then we're going to talk about some truths and actually some myth busting and how it shows up. So what is the actual problem that we're talking about and how it shows up in everybody's workplace? And then we're going to explore 8 questions, which are actually connected to your book, Leadership or Leadership. So I would like your interaction and support on that too. So shall we go?
Let's do it.
Well, first and foremost, I think it always helps if we introduce ourselves. So I'm Debbie Halls-Evans.
And I'm David.
And we run And is a coaching business. And we are very specific about what we do and don't do, which is that we're very value-led, we're very purpose-driven, and we help people become unstuck. And that actually is across many different parts. So it's either their personal, professional, life, business, it is all encompassing. And we've done over 10,000 hours of coaching. We have global partners. We work in America, across Europe and the UK. We have our own workshops, programs, products, and services. We do not use other people's products or services. We've created them all ourselves over the past 20 years from our own life experiences. And as you build your relationship with us, you'll recognize how that comes out in our style. And we work with many different types. So as I've just said, businesses, people that are in startups, acquisition, exit. It actually really is when somebody is willing and ready to start the work themselves, we are the best people for you to be working with. Now, what we have done and have been collating over the past 20 years is information around leadership. And leadership for us is defined about self-leadership. And what we want to really share with you today is why we believe leadership needs a rethink and all of the data that we've collated and why we can answer that. Now, Dave and I are really simple folk. We live in a field in the middle of nowhere in the Scottish Highlands for that very reason. We don't want complex or convoluted ways, and that is a very direct representation of how we coach. Simply, if the only thing you take away from this think tank webinar is the answer and the problem are exactly the same, just one has a lack of shared values, lack of straight talking, lack of asking for feedback, lack of asking what can I do for you, and a lack of make a difference. And if you can walk away and sit with those things and see what it is that you're doing, you can then help fundamentally your own self-leadership. And
Debbie, I believe, right, that there's another quick fundamental truth here to put right at the start of this conversation. We are complacent with the use of time in leadership. We don't recognize that time is an operating system that's running regardless every day on your clock, second by second, minute by minute, hour by hour. Your leadership's the same. But when you're complacent with it and you don't intentionally think about making it better, improving, using skill and building, it never, ever brings back the yield that it could do over time because you're not putting your own leadership operating system into play intentionally.
Totally agree. And I think that then also highlights why we believe leadership or leadership, and there is a definitive deficit, is we've got outdated thinking. So we're going to explore that. We've got multi-generational workplaces, which is only going to continue to evolve. We've got a lack of equity, and we've also got a technological age, which is an exciting element, but also how we choose to use it is really important. So what I'd like to do is just explore what the problem is and what we're experiencing every single day when we're talking to people and where our data's come from. So most of the data that we're sharing with you is from our own data and specifically we have honed into the data 82 senior marketing leaders, CMOs, CTOs, etc. So people who are literally leading businesses from strategy people and a marketing perspective. But also what we know is that at that level, not only is it lonely, but there is a decision fatigue, there's a burnout, and there's a reactive management. And we really want to explore that and show you how that actually shows up in the workplace. Now, the data from Harvard says that 77% of organizations are already reporting leadership gaps. And this is not just at C-suite, this is every level. So let's look at hierarchy in business and what actually happens. If we've got somebody who's burnout in a C-suite, there is a domino effect that happens throughout the whole business. And it literally manifests itself as a deficit. And that deficit keeps growing. It's not abating. And what we want to be able to help you with is to step away from being reactive, not using outdated leadership models. We are in the modern age, and we want to, Dave, it stopped sharing.
I can still see it, Debbie.
All right, okay, my screen's flickering and doing weird things, so excuse me a minute, I can't actually see anything. So we've got a reactive, outdated leadership practices, and it's holding back at every level. So it doesn't matter where you're leading. And remember, we coach self-leadership, and that's really important because all leadership starts with you, the individual. Now, from our data that we've collated, is 70% of those 82 people felt that their decision-making was reactive. Now, this for us is how we represent leadership. So because reaction is needed, we need a balance of proactivity and reactivity. But when we are literally in a cycle of consistent reaction, we're not actually helping anybody. We're not being efficient. We're not delivering. We actually then start to have our own internal issues. And that comes out in many different forms. Comes out of lack of collaboration. It highlights generational gaps, which don't need to be highlighted because we're all people working together. It can really influence self-doubt, and it really impacts how we communicate and affect and support each other. So what we did share was at the beginning, we now know what the problem is. There is a big deficit where people are not in their own internal world being able to help other people as leaders because they're already struggling with their own self-leadership. This shows up in many ways. And what we ask you to do throughout this whole Think Tank webinar is be reflective, a little bit introspective. And how does it show up for you? And how is it showing up in the business that you work in? It might be your own business and it might be a large corporate. It doesn't matter. But I promise you, we know that this will show up in some shape or form. So either you're struggling with lack of collaboration, that you have got definitive issues around generations within your business. There's a massive amount of self-doubt that might come from you, but also you might see it exhibited in people that you work with. Ineffective communication has a knock-on effect. And if actually this whole list is, if you go up and down it, they all feed each other. Overwhelm and stress and feeling stuck mean that our communication isn't effective. We then have self-doubt. We then can't communicate across generational things, and we don't collaborate. When we start micromanaging, we create toxic team dynamics that then creates poor work-life balance, and we put fear into the workplace, and that's really very unpleasant, and again shows up in all these things as well. We have people that feel that they're not good enough, and we can actually share the data with where that comes from. There's a fear of failure rather than us actually learning and having a learning and growth mindset and curiosity and openness. We don't finish things because we're always reacting and moving on to the next thing. You know, are you the kind of person who has no gap in their calendar?
And again, Debbie, I'd like to reinforce something here, right? So you're talking about imposter syndrome, fear of failure, real challenging beliefs that get in the way of progress. And then you'll hear a leader say, well, that this person should be more confident. And let's not segue into our beliefs about confidence, but I want to just ask the leader in this webinar to think about when you see somebody whose confidence is maybe lower, right? What conditions have you set? What shadow do you cast that over time as an operating system has taken that person into those conditions? Because if you're managing, you're creating that space, you're giving it space to exist.
Yeah. Which highlights the day-to-day that we know that 85% of people are not leading, they are managing. Yeah. Therefore, it self-manifests, you know, it's self-fulfilling. So let's look at what else leadership for us shows up and how we can really start. The problem is big. We genuinely believe we see it every day in our coaching business across the USA, the UK and Europe. So it's not something that's made up, it exists. And I know that you'll be sat there understanding that you are witnessing this or experiencing it yourself. So we're going to share a little bit of data. One of the things that we offer at the end of this is the opportunity to explore even further with us, to actually get a white paper which gives you even more detail, because 39 minutes is what we've got and we're really precious of your time. But let's understand how it shows up and what it looks like. So 50% of leaders, this is data that is from the individuals experiencing it, do not believe in their ability to make the difference required, the change, the implementation, the action. That's a massive statistic of people that are sat there not knowing. And there is a reason for that. 6% of them are sat there going, I don't think I've got the skills. So we could have over promoted somebody, or we could be in that cycle that we don't invest in these people. You know, for someone to lead, they need investment. It's really important. Now, what we ask you to do is, again, there's a lot of information here. So we're just going to give you the headlines. You can reflect on this afterwards as well, or even share your thoughts and thinking with us. And we're happy to have a discussion and call. But we would like you right now to consider, where does this show up for you? And does it show up in your business? Emotional burnout and fatigue. What is it that you're seeing? Are people reporting stress and fatigue as an issue? We know 65% of the data that we've collated is that's a lot of people. 75% of people feel that they're just in this reactive cycle, and 50% feel that they're either in a cycle of fear or imposter syndrome. Again, the data feeds itself. Every single one of these feeds each other. So are you experiencing this or are you witnessing it across your business?
And again, Debbie, just as another supporting of you in this data, just somebody thinking, what does that mean? Have you ever heard somebody say this statement, right? I've just got through this important work or this crisis that we were responding to, and now I don't know what I should be doing.
Yeah. And then it also shows up again. Remember, they're all self-perpetuating. We feel disconnected and we create disconnected teams, right? So this is, nobody sat there with an intention to do this. This is what is culturally happening within a business, right? We've not invested in people, we're not aware of it, or we're actually not even sure how we reduce that deficit. So are you seeing that? Are you seeing overwhelm and stress and how it comes across, this micromanagement element, overuse of that language as well? Remember, it becomes a defense mechanism for people. And that lack of development, understanding what that actually means. And this is not about adding complexity. You know, for us, it's about simplifying everything. Go back to that very first slide, which we introduced, where if you have a straightforward conversation with somebody from a base of kind and respectness, you are going to get better results than sitting in a space of worry, fear, and loss, and that you don't know how you're going to have that conversation. Leaning in is the most important part. Now, this is a collection of meta studies, and this is about us being really clear. For us and our experiences across our coaching businesses, the people that we work with, the leaders and the people that are working on their own self-leadership, are doing the best they can. And what happens is we can then sit there and become very judgy and very assumptive. And we have to remove that. And we have to actually see the person behind all of these challenges. There is a lack of skill, whether that comes through them not having the investment in them as an individual, or that the business doesn't actually share opportunity for them. There's also the leaders themselves, by default, domino effect, create stress for the employees. So therefore, that cycle just keeps going around. We talk about the hamster wheel of life. It literally is self-perpetuating. We then talk about self-reflection and the ability to emotionally connect. We are people talking to people. We are human to human. This is how true leadership shows up. Real leadership is caring about people. If we don't do any of these things, we then have a knock-on effect that we don't collaborate. We say we do. You might have it in your values. You might talk about it all the time, but nobody does it because they're already sat in a base of fear and worry and concern. And we're not very good at giving or receiving feedback. And we're going to show you right at the end some instant ways that you can really implement that, which is super exciting. So there's two carryovers as well from our studies, is that 40% of people feel that they are not managing their time effectively. And that literally then, again, self-perpetuates every single statistic that we've shared with you. And the other part is this then creates miscommunication. And when we don't understand the power of our language and the impact it has on others, we are literally starting from a base of fear, defense, not sure where to go, and exhibiting some of the things that Dave shared with us as well. So we have this massive amount of information of, here's the problem. Yes, we know it exists. And now what we want to do is we want to do the hope and the opportunity that is available to everybody. And from Dave's book, which he shared with you before, Leadership or Leadershit, is that it's broken down around 8 deep questions. And we're going to surface, but we are going to ask you to really look at these questions and how you can then start to use them and then apply them across your business. And the tool or method that we use is our own name, our brand, and we ask you to consider, what action can I take? What can I do now? The most important part, because sitting on this and then not doing anything with it is irrelevant. It doesn't do anything. You just it's actually feeding the deficit that already exists. And what can you do differently? This is not about change. Change is this fear word, and we're going to share with you what we use instead and how you can apply that in your business. Change has a behavioral impact. Start with perspective. What is a different perspective I can take on this situation? And it will transform how you start to lean in. So this is where I'm going to really bring Dave in, and we're going to work through is, what action are you going to take? What can you do now? And what perspective can you take differently? And I'm just going to get Dave to share what each of these questions mean. And then we've got one question for you to walk away with. So Dave, handing over to you.
Great. So the first phase, authentic or fake, is a really great question around leadership. And there's a couple of things you'll see on the slide about noticing what you're not noticing. But one of the things I'd like you to notice is when you choose a new skill as a leader, maybe it's a edification of a belief you might have. Maybe you're going to improve that belief system. When you start off, it's initially fake. What we often find is people quit new decisions or new skills really early because the people closest to them in their team or their family or their best friends didn't know about it. So they go, what's up with you? Or why are you being like that? And then suddenly the person who's made the leader, who's decided that new skill, that new belief, that new thing, quits the new decision whilst it was fake. Now, all of the chapters and all of the faces of leadership in the book, they work in harmony. Fake is the starting place of a new decision until it becomes authentic. Equally, being fake is saying you are something when you're not modeling that behavior. So we're talking about how they work hand in hand. And therefore, we want to leave you with a question with phase 1 from the book, and you can look deeper into the book in your own time, hopefully, and we'd love to help you do that, is what skill are you working on right now that's going to be fake? And if you just help people understand that you're doing it, they'll support you to see it through to becoming an authentic part of your skill set.
Fabulous. So again, let's go into phase 2, Dave, and you cannot give what you don't have.
I see too many leaders who are tired, and tiredness comes usually at the cost of neglecting recovery and self-care. And what we want you to think about today, all over the world in the aviation industry, if you get on a plane and you're about to take off and they're about to do the demonstration, the safety demo, and you know what they say, even if you've seen this before, every plane is different, etc. We all take a look, yeah, it's the same. We know that when the oxygen mask comes down, you put your own first on before helping somebody else. Leadership's the same. We should be taking self-care seriously. I see too many leaders attempting to help others when they're exhausted, or they have decided that they're so busy that they've deprioritized their own self-care or their own routines. And what I'm asking you to think about today is, can you do something today for 10 minutes to build your self-care? Because you cannot give, as you said, Debbie, what you don't have. And when you're looking at the and process, action now, do something different. What could you do? It's as simple as listening to your favorite song, stopping for a moment, thinking, making sure you eat These are all self-care, simple things that we can do, as well as the longer periods of rest, vacation, training, physicality. What are all those other things? Because when you don't have it left, you can't give it.
So what we want to do as well is show some examples of people who we've coached and what's actually happened and why we know that the work that they do with us is really helping them. So we had a CMO that we're working with, and they once they were going through this program, and we did an initial short workshop with them, and they said to us they thought they were leading, and then they suddenly realized actually that was leadershit, because they were just consistently reacting. And again, I don't overestimate the word of consistent. When you're only doing the same thing over and over again, it doesn't help anybody. So the program helped them see where they, and this is their language, where they were missing and how they could improve. And again, what we then do is we go back and make sure that we get the studies to see where that improvement sits. And for them, it was about decision making. People were being more focused. They understood what the decision was, big thing. And also the team were being more productive because they understood, and the communication improved. And again, for them, there was a reduction in that stress and that reactive management. And this is a continuous program. Leadership or leadership is something that we work on every day. It's not something that suddenly you've mastered. There'll always be a situation that you've got to be. That question is leadership or leadership. It's really simple. Which am I being? So Dave, we've got the next phase. Now, I did want to just say one thing before you go into it. The questions are really important because they're oxymoronic by default, right? So they literally contradict themselves. They're neither right nor wrong. There's no good or bad in this. It's the ability to sit and question.
Now, this is a really important one because your brain wires itself to your surroundings. So there's a couple of giveaways on here, as simple as this slide is. How you set yourself up to work each day. Is your environment a positive reflection of the space that you need? Does it encourage you? You know, if you go to a top sports team's changing rooms, you would hope to see things that inspire good thinking because it helps. It's like one of those tiny incrementals. But in this particular chapter, we explore the argument of mindset versus motivation. And I'd like to bring to your attention that if there was a 100% scale, right, 90% of that should be mechanicalized mindset. A routine that you do regardless of the weather outside, the weather being a metaphor, right? Whether it's raining or not, there's only bad equipment or bad clothing, right? It's up to you, beyond safety and weather warnings. But your mindset should be a non-negotiable routine, right? And it's been, that clue has been around since the start of time. Yet we rely on the 10% motivation. How am I feeling today? And then if you've taken the leap of making your feeling and you've given it a name, oh, I'm too tired or fatigued or I'm upset. Labelless feelings are just sensations. If you just keep your motivation clean and your mindset as a routine, you can get started every day. Remember, 90% mechanicalized routine, 10% motivation. So motivation doesn't matter almost. The mindset kicks in. And I just want to ask you, what's your daily mindset routine? Do you have one? And if you'd like some help in working one out, you can reach out to us and we'll show you things that we do and some things that our coachees learn.
Fabulous. Thank you. So phase 4, no communication is communication. One of my favorites.
Well, it's remarkable. Leaders all over the world, and I even thought it myself many years ago when I had to learn the hard way, was how many times do I have to tell somebody till they get it? And the answer is the same today as it was then, however many it takes. We find that leaders spend time communicating from their version of the world, how they literally see it, and they don't think about the other person's experience. One of the things we'd like you to learn to do is to meet the other person where they are at. And what we find with connected or cut off, there's a couple of examples. Somebody decides to leave a business, and all of a sudden everyone drops them like lead or a concrete block in the water. They're just like, don't talk to them anymore. Now, unless it really is somebody going to your competition and there's legal reasons, why would you do that? Also, where we have other examples where clients don't tell their people the truth for all kinds of reasons. And then what happens is you create this space for the gap to exist. So people make stuff up. It takes so much effort to undo made up stuff, myths and legends in your organization. So all I'd like you to think about, having said all of that, is when you communicate, do you own the result of it? Because it is your responsibility to own the result. The meaning of the communication is the response that you get. It means it was you, not somebody else's fault.
Thanks, Dave. So our next example is a CTO who had been struggling a lot with a brand new, rapidly growing team. And they felt that they were just constantly putting out fires. So going back to that data that you understand that we've got 85% of people that just feel they're managing and they're not actually getting ready to lead in. So what we did through the program was help them understand their own method and how they could work through, understand their patterns that were then actually contributing to that. And this had a knock-on positive effect to the way the team engaged with them. Again, that decision making, it removed that fatigue, but also that they were seeing that they could actually deal with, they could handle the situations in front of them. And it didn't feel like they were constantly in that melee of firefighting, having to just constantly solve something, but that ability to step back. Now, we are only giving you surface. There is so much rich information and opportunity and method and skill that we can share with you. But we really want to hope that you can start to see that by taking action, doing something now and taking a different perspective, you are actually going to be able to do some instant impact across your business. So phase 5 is inspired or expired, Dave.
And Debbie, there's an old saying that there's only one thing you can be certain about in life is that you will die one day. Yeah. That's inspiration, right? As soon as you're born, you're on the path to death, right? Now, we're not looking to demotivate anybody by those statements, but it is a fact of life. That's what happens in nature. But in leadership, you are either inspiring or you're expiring. Now, let's just stop for a moment and think about the last time you were inspired, where hopefully you took in that sharp intake of breath like this. But the question is, the feeling that you thought was inspiration, was it inspiration, or did you just feel nice? Because what we've learned over 20 years of being coaches is that inspiration is followed by action, which is why we've invented our own word for that called inspiractions, where inspiration and action occurs, they go hand in hand. And I'd like you to think about how much time do you spend inspiring action, either in your self-leadership, if you're consuming this for yourself and your own leadership skills, or in the team that you lead, or the company that you're part of, or the clients that you serve. Because inspiration is a choice. People want to hang around people who have better energy than other people who've got less good energy. Forgive my poor English. But inspiration suggests you're going to create a space where thriving and feeling good and being towards things is going to be part of the everyday mindset. That's what inspiration is. What are you going to inspire into action as part of your leadership?
Okay, and then we're just 2 phases away. So meaningful or meaningless?
There's a famous film, Dead Poets Society, where you've all most likely seen it, or if you haven't, I recommend watching that movie, Dead Poets Society, after this. And they really hero in on this. The powerful play goes on, will you contribute a verse? It's all about meaning. We know through our work with Tim Dugan and some of the other people we've met in that space that talk about the power of meaning in play, is that every employee needs 8 hours of meaningfulness in their working life per week to have a better well-being environment. If you're not taking meaningfulness seriously, you're diluting the energy and the opportunity and the potential within your team or business. Also, how many things do you do every day in your business? How many processes do you have that are actually just straight meaningless? They add no value. You haven't revised it. You haven't thought about ways to make things better. All we want you to think about today is, do you understand the power of meaning? And therefore, where there's lots of processes and things that people have to do you connect the meaning in those things to the meaning of your business or the meaning of your team? So people can get a deeper sense of worth out of the great work or the normal work that they still have to do.
So our final example is a global marketing director, and this was somebody who was convinced that they were doing an amazing job. And then when we actually went through some of the data and some of the examples and actually shared how it shows up, they suddenly realized that they weren't leading. And for them, it was about them realizing that they were really disconnected. They were disconnected at a level that was then actually projecting out on other people. And by doing the work and helping themselves, they then helped everybody else around them. And this is the power of understanding that all of us, every single one of us, has the ability to be a little bit shit in our leadership. And not because we sit there and plan it or structure it or put it out there. It just happens. That is what happens in the day-to-day. And again, this continuous work and being and having the ability to sit with methods and skills that you can then apply in each of these situations is really important, because it really does make a big difference to everybody. We have a method and a principle, which is work with one to benefit the many. And one of at a time, can genuinely make a massive difference. So the last two phases, Dave, phase 7 is revolution or evolution.
I'd like to see businesses be brave enough to get rid of the word change. Change is driven home by project management platforms and ethoses, but we seem to neglect the most important part. People are usually the biggest asset in a business, and yet we force feed them the word change, and we spend all our energy in asking them to feel better about it and to see it better and to reframe it, versus, well, you could save all that time if you just got rid of it. And I believe if you think about some of the great lessons in business from other places you can look, from IBM and Apple, or you have a tick here and a talk here and all that kind of thing, evolution or revolution is much better. You're only in revolution, Debbie, if you're in a marketplace where either it's changed dramatically and your business is in trouble, or you're doing something that no one has done before. Most of us are going to be in a continuous state of evolution, evolving. What I like about evolution, it feels like we can do it. It feels like if we just applied it in a pure principle, what one thing can we all evolve on at the same time? And then celebrate that we actually did it. What I would like you to think about today with leadership or leadership in this think tank webinar is, what state are you in? Revolution or evolution? I hope you're moving to evolution, unless your market dictates a different idea.
So the final phase is reality or illusion. And we share some realities here, but I know you want to, people can read these afterwards. What are your thoughts, Dave?
There's no perfect leader, Debbie. What we do know is, in this new version from the book, is we're asking people to model the leadership required of our time, regardless of the situation. We want you to stand up for what you believe in, to be true to who you say you are, to not be someone who says they are one thing and then acts out a different reality. This is about making sure you understand where maybe you're distorting yourself. You're living out an illusion. Maybe you're not even self-aware enough to realize where your gaps are yet. And if that's the case, because it can be, and I was like that once, many years ago, where I didn't quite know what shadow I was casting till I sought help to reach out and find out ways to work those things out through coaching. This is about being at your best and making sure you are operating in reality. There is a famous saying, I cite it in the book, from the Cars movie, where Lightning McQueen is going looking for the friends of Doc Hudson. If anyone's watching this has seen it, it's really interesting, because he's looking for an answer. And Doc Hudson's friends say to Lightning McQueen, the car character, and say, the truth is quicker, kid. And that's the power of reality. Jim Collins calls it the brutal truth. The faster we work through the brutal truth in our leadership and work on it together, we can build places with hope at the heart of it and improve every part of leadership.
So what we ask you to do is, we will send all this information to you and just go through those questions. And this final question is, what are your realities in your business and what are the illusions? So consider, what action can you take? What can you do now? And what different perspectives can you now undertake, knowing that this is going to be in your business? Now, we did promise a couple of things, so I'm just going to quickly run through those before we finish the Think Tank webinar. Please do decide now what are the things that you are going to commit to. And it might be what we share here is 5 words for your leadership. And then you can then work with the people in your leadership team and business about their 5 words. It's a really powerful way of starting and understanding where people are at. Really go through the phases of leadership and start to explore those 8 questions on how do they actually show up in your business, and really sit with that point is you can't give what you don't have. That sits underlining all of those phases, really important. And the final one that I shared right at the beginning was, please do reflect and consider these questions as something that you do every single day. What feedback do you have for me today? What can I do to help you today? What can I do differently to support you to succeed? That is leadership. What happens is we fall into the trap of leadership and our agenda overrides our situation with whomever we are.
Debbie, can I just say one thing about that? Because I don't want anyone to misinterpret. If you go back for 1 second, right? That third part about feedback, I'd like to be more pointed. Instead of looking at your people thinking about what their feedback is, why don't you just focus first and ask them what they have for you, and prove to them you're serious, execute that feedback, and then ask them, but go first.
Thanks. So conclusion wise, we really want to be able to say to you that all of this is fixable. A deficit means it's something we can work on. It's an opportunity to us really help, and it is fixable. But we do have to take action, and we have to inspire ourselves to take that action and not get stuck in these old patterns. This is a continuous cycle and something that we would love to be able to help you with as well. What we want to do is we want to be able to share even more with you. We have a podcast, which will be in the link that you get with your email after this. You'll also get a link to read the audio, listen to the audio book as well, or you can even purchase the ebook for $2.99 right now, which is an amazing offer. So we will give you all of those opportunities for you to even explore more, but please do get in touch with us. We would be delighted to be able to share even more of the depth that goes with this. And just if you even just join and get our newsletter, what you'll do is you'll get even more insights and free content that is going to help you really see what is leadership or leadership in your business. So thank you very much for your precious time. Do appreciate it. Thanks, Dave, for sharing the 8 Faces and the book with us. And we look forward to seeing you at our next Think Tank.
Thanks, Debbie.